We were told my daughter was regulated 100% of the time during kindergarten. And I was like,
What? Shouldn't be regulated 100% of the time, even on a bad day.
I'm like, first of all, I'm pretty sure she's human with a nervous system. And I don't know that anybody is regulated 100% of the time. No kindergartner should be presenting as that even, which she wasn't, but like from there.
Yeah.
And so it's this, I'm like, I'm going down a rabbit hole and getting lost away on a rabbit hole. But I think that there's this really interesting dynamic. And at the same time, we're excluding the voice of somebody who really adds value and insight and a needed perspective in the conversation.
Hey mama, are you feeling like you're walking on eggshells around your little one? Does every day feel like a battleground from breakfast to bedtime? You're not alone. If meltdowns, sensory sensitivities, and communication challenges are turning your days upside down, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Sensory Savvy Mama, the podcast for moms raising neurodivergent little ones. I'm your host, Victoria, and I get it. I've been there. The endless research, the frustrating appointments, the feeling like no one understands what you and your child are going through. Here, we ditch the cookie-cutter advice and embrace the power of understanding your child's unique sensory needs within the context of your family. We'll dive into practical strategies, expert insights, and real-life stories to help you create a calmer, more connected family life. Because you deserve to feel empowered, not exhausted. Let's ditch the overwhelm and discover the joy of raising a sensory kid in a neurodiverse family. You ready? Let's go.
Welcome back to the Sensory Savvy Mama podcast. This is Victoria, and I am so excited for this episode. This was a fiery episode, and we just jumped right into it. There was no small talk. Our guest today was Lisa Baskin Wright of Lisa Baskin Wright on Instagram and website of the same name. She is an amazing and fearless advocate. She helps parents of autistic kids between the ages of 3 and 14 feel confident at the IEP table. She has the amazing expertise of not only being through a very intense lived experience of this, but she's also an educator herself. She was a teacher and she has family in the educational system, and she had all the supports in place that you would have thought that this would have never happened to her. And yet they went through it. And her husband even wrote a book about it. So definitely check out her website and all the supports that she has there. But I am so excited for you to hear this episode, especially if you have been through a difficult or challenging IEP process and just wondering, one, you're not the only one, but two, some of the things that you can do to support yourself and resources for you along the way. So I hope you enjoy this episode so very, very much. Let's jump right in. I think for all of us in this space, at least for us moms with the lived experience, there is this weight of, I want it to be different for the next one coming up behind.
100%.
Right?
That's 1,000% my why.
Yeah.
Without any question. I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. We have a certain level of privilege, right? We're white, we're financially stable. I am a former teacher, and everyone in my family and on my husband's side of the family are in public education. My father-in-law was a director of special education and wrote the SELPA bylaws for several counties. So we had, and we're all very close and supportive. So we had access to knowledge and information to understand the lay of the land.
Yeah.
And things did not go well. They were terrible. And we ended up needing legal counsel for many years. And I, as nice a person as the attorney was, I didn't want any of that. It was a miserable, awful process. I have 6 non-disclosures for my kid, like 6 separate settlements. Not fun.
No.
That, right? And my hope is to help folks not need legal representation. And we never ended up in an actual due process. We filed multiple times. The district filed against us multiple times. That's fun, by the way. That's when we really lost my husband. His humor went out the door when they filed for the second time against us. He was like, that's it. I am 1,000% finished. I actually think that's when he started writing the book. He's like, put this in the court of public opinion. I'm out of here. It's miserable. I've sat in mediations where the administrative law judge is like, you're going to end up in due process. They will not budge. And then you've wasted all this time and you're thousands and thousands of dollars. And you're like, I want to play with my kid. I don't want to be sitting here arguing over her access to an education, debating her humanity. Who does this? I would wake up in the middle of the night like, she's 5. Who does this? So it's a painful path. And the Twilight music in your head, did I make this up? This was one of the pieces of the conversation I had with this darling mom last night. She's being gaslit so bad that am I dreaming this?
Yeah.
Am I dreaming this experience and this conversation?
Yeah.
Am I making things up about my child? Am I overreacting to things instead of trusting your instinct and saying, hey, my kid needs something a little bit different in order to stay in their body, to access learning, to access joy in life. And there's some barriers that are up in the way. I think my gut instinct is more right than it isn't. And then you've got the noise coming at you and it's confusing. It's isolating. I literally think you're the only one. It's really interesting because my kids are older and I'm not great with tech or social media. People are like, I've got a great page. And I'm like, Mama's making it up as she goes along. She doesn't know what she's doing. My family is very private. I tend to be more like, here it is, whatever. The irony that my husband wrote a book is hilarious to me because I think half his coworkers don't even know that he has a family. Like, it's hysterical to me. But their right to privacy needs to be protected. And so it's this very strange position that parents of neurodivergent and disabled children are put in because there's this expectation that you're going to just open the doors to all the things, right? I'm going to tell you all the things. I'm going to share with you what our life at home looks like, only to be told that sounds like a home problem. We don't see it at school, right? I'm supposed to inherently trust you, except I don't know anything about what's your name again. And then you're not holding this information well necessarily. And so it's a really tricky process. And advice I often give, especially if the dynamic is the we don't see it dynamic. Yeah. Even if it's the criminalizing your child dynamic. Yeah. The advice I often give is to be more vulnerable, is to say, hey, we used to try those kinds of strategies too. They weren't successful. And so we have to unlearn some things. And here are some of the resources that we leaned into. And here are some of the things we're trying. And lo and behold, we have a happier kid at home. We understand how hard it is to look in the mirror and reverse course and question some of the things that we're doing. So we're sharing with you what our journey is because we don't expect perfection. You're right. We do expect some curiosity and some willingness. Right.
Yeah. And that's something like in working as an OT in school-based, especially I worked for a while as a traveler and contractor. So I jumped around from different schools in different states, saw different ways of doing things, which was really eye-opening for the school experience for parents. If you come into an IEP team where they are overworked, understaffed, and burnout, you are going to hit so much more resistance because all they're going to see is numbers. They're just going to look at the data. They forget that we're talking about a living, breathing child. And it is so hard to get people to open their eyes to that humanity of all of us at the table. And I think there were a couple situations where I started recommending for parents, like bring your kid to the IEP. I know this is not a fun process and your kid is not going to have the easiest time paying attention, but I promise you people are going to watch what they say when your child is sitting right there. And they need to remember who this is about. This is not about numbers. This is about a person who we care about very deep. And it's so sad to see that most everyone came into the field because they wanted to do good work. They wanted to help. And the way that our systems are set up that burn people on both ends is just such a tragedy to me.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I was talking to somebody the other day, I can't even remember who, but I was saying, I think that the word expert makes me super uncomfortable. Somebody introduced me as a PDA expert. And I said, oh gosh, curious learner.
I love that terminology.
Expert, absolutely not. But if I have a string at the IEP table, it is seeing that humanity in everybody in the room and helping lift that up so that folks can let their guard down and we can all tap into the learner that we have inside of us. We can all tap into, oh, that's right. We're here to talk about Lisa. Yeah, right? And we really enjoy this learner and we do see them. It doesn't matter where the gaps are in the communication, whether it's the team is misunderstanding compliance as like true engagement and learning, or if they're misunderstanding dysregulation as willful defiance. It doesn't matter in the sense of there needs to be a reframe. I'm not seeing this learner in the entirety of their being. We're looking through this more narrow scope, and that scope has bias and judgment built into it. And in both cases where this kind of disconnect is happening, harm is happening, right? And that learner isn't internalizing whatever that messaging is, right? So I've had learners who are higher masking and they internalize that stress response and tend towards perfectionism and I gotta be the good student, right?
Yeah.
When they realize that they're grown-ups in the school environment, think they're doing just fine.
Hello, late diagnosed woman,
Right.
neurodivergence, and now autoimmune disease.
Big.
Mechanism.
There is some real harm in not being seen in your full humanity. And when that is realized, there is so much fracture that happens. Like I have a family I'm working with. I absolutely love them. They're just so wonderful. Both parents are neurodivergent. Both their children are. The kids are young and so they'll pop into the Zoom. And so I feel like I have a little bit of a touchstone with them. They're just so dear. The older of the two children, they both have IEPs, but the older of the two, the team is questioning the need for continued eligibility. So we've gone through this dance, and I shouldn't say that in the past tense, but we're going through the dance here a little bit. We lifted the needle somewhat, but we're dancing. And when this young person realized that the team was questioning the need for these supports that this learner knows they need, they started vomiting every day. They dropped multiple pounds. This is a young kid. School, I'll say school refusal, but school-based anxiety that school can't totally flip, right? I remember we were sitting in a meeting talking about and having no tech skills. The camera that I had wasn't working, so it was like half on, half off. Oh my gosh. From this ridiculous camera, I'm like, I am so sorry to say the hard thing out loud when I'm literally flashing in and out like a broken television. But the hard thing needs to be said. As soon as this young person learned, because the parents, the child asked, the parents were honest, as they should be, realized that you all were questioning their need for this support, that's when this all really shifted and went south. So there's real harm there. And then I have it for my kids that externalize that stress response where they are painted as the naughty child. And so then the whole dynamic in the classroom is, oh, well, that's Lisa. Lisa's mean. Or, oh, that's Lisa. She's naughty or whatever it is. And they're internalizing, oh, I'm not a good kid.
It's so eye-opening for me. So there were two specific events. So when we had the pandemic happen, there was a whole bunch that was coming out of trauma-informed research and continuing eds that they were providing for schools. I happened to be working for a school at that time and was taking this trauma-informed course. And I was like, this is how I've been operating as an OT for all of my sensory kids. Like, what's the difference here? This is my most effective treatment method. And then I read the book that Oprah and is it Dr. Stephen Perry? Am I saying the name right? I'll have to look it up. The What Happened book. Oh, I need to check that title.
That's new to me.
To you?
Like, I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm like, well, what the?
Listen to the audiobook because the dialogue of the two of them, you just get so much more with the voice. What Happened to You by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah. And he's a trauma psychologist, but has also done some studies on different cultures. Anyway, I was listening to this book, and again, similar kind of thing. They're talking about the trauma-informed approach. And again, I was like, these are all my sensory kids. This is what we have to do. I just realized our kids have been so misunderstood. To make it easier for the administrators, teachers, and the staff, we categorize these children quickly to make our jobs easier. If we can label them as bad, then we don't have to stay curious and try to figure out what's going on underneath because we don't have the training for that. Many special ed programs that I have worked in over the years have very little understanding of sensory integration and how it impacts everyday experiences beyond that's a sensory kid. What does that mean? What does that mean? Don't just give everyone a fidget. That's not what sensory is. Exactly. Like you have to mom for this.
Oh my gosh.
In their hands.
Right. And I'm curious about your experience. This has been my experience. I was actually sitting in an IEP meeting, I think it was last week, and I thought a rather ridiculous statement was made. I typed in my notes, "Thank you for telling me you don't do this." I didn't say it out loud. I typed it in my notes because I didn't want to put the energy in
It
the
was
room.
very responsible of you.
But one of the things that is, I think, common in practice, I'm curious if you had this as an experience as well, is that especially at an initial assessment, OT is left out.
Oh, 1,000%. 1,000%.
Right. And so
We don't stand up and represent because there are states that say no sensory in school. That's an outpatient clinical thing. We won't talk about sensory then. Like, we're going to just ignore the whole person. Like, we'll just pretend that they're not a sensory being. Like, like, what do we disconnect their brain? Like, you can't not be a sensory being. That's how we learn, is through our senses.
this sector of special education said what, I'm paraphrasing, but basically OT is a related service. So we did you a favor, including it as part of the initial evaluation for a kid with such significant sensory differences, like diagnosed with ARFID, and everything
I'm
came
like
out.
chilled.
Right. Scores all came back flat because the gen ed teacher filled them out. I have compassion about this because I am a former gen ed teacher, and we got an afternoon, a whole afternoon in training on IEPs. That's it in the entire year of my credential program. And then 20 years later, I went back and worked for that university for many years, and nothing, and I do mean nothing, had changed. They had not changed. So general education teachers, like you were saying earlier, like folks who go into education because they care about kids, especially in the younger years. And I was a high school teacher, so I'm not trying to knock secondary staff, but sometimes it could be passion for subject matter differently than you see at the elementary. But really, you don't love kids, you can take your subject matter passion and go into industry. It really doesn't tend to drive one to a classroom. There's got to be some passion about how kids learn, wanting to be a part of that, wanting to help. That is the driver to this profession. It's mind boggling to me that we then take those folk, don't properly prepare them. We talk somewhat about differentiated instruction, but not in the context of disability. And then we're relying on these folks to both simultaneously be the gatekeepers of access while totally discrediting their voice and their opinion at every other step in the IEP process. And so you take these general education teachers and you give them all these, I'm sorry, awful rating forms. Most gen ed teachers don't look at their learners through the lens of atypical or right, like all the ableist ick language that's in those rating forms.
Right.
They don't know how to fill them out because they have no training whatsoever in that arena. They feel like they're being disrespectful and disparaging of their learners, so the scores come out flat. Or they've got the externalizing kid and they don't know what to do, and then the scores come out so extreme that we're like, okay, let's take a deep breath here.
Yeah.
And then we put all the weight on that. Oh, this sounds like a home problem because Miss Wright's not seeing this in her classroom. And I'm like, with all due respect, Miss Wright's probably seeing a whole lot more than she thinks that she's seeing because she doesn't know that overcompliance or needing to be first or asking her a million times the same question is a signal that this learner is experiencing stress in the classroom, because Miss Wright's a patient, kind teacher who cares about kids. And so she's just going to keep showing up for this young person. So you'll hear things like, I just want them to be a kid and not feel like they have to take on the responsibility of the classroom, right? And you're like, yes. And did you know that's how Lisa demonstrates stress? And then all of a sudden the light bulbs go off, except the way they filled out the forms is that Lisa's just fantastic. We were told my daughter was regulated 100% of the time during kindergarten. And I was like, what?
Shouldn't be regulated 100% of the time, even on a best day.
I'm like, first of all, I'm pretty sure she's human with a nervous system, and I don't know that anybody is regulated 100% of the time. No kindergartner should be presenting as that even, which she wasn't, but like from there.
Yeah.
And so it's this, I'm going down a rabbit hole and getting lost away on a rabbit hole. But I think that there's this really interesting dynamic. And at the same time, we're excluding the voice somebody who really adds value and insight and a needed perspective in the conversation. And you're right that there are certain states where there's so much pushback. We can only do fine motor here.
But sensory informs fine motor.
I have a question about this coming from the teacher side of things, because this was something that I've observed. We have this conditioning as parents that the behavior of our child is our parenting report card, right? I have seen this also in the classroom with teachers, especially with my kids who need movement to regulate. I'll walk into a room to do an observation, to screen a kid, to check in, do a push-in service. And I don't usually do push-in until I've gotten into a good rapport with the teacher, because that's really intimidating to have another professional come in and just sit and watch you in your class while they're working with another student.
Yeah.
I get that. But what I have seen is teachers feel the same way. If my kids are not sitting down and listening, if they need movement, that means I'm not a good teacher. Yeah. And I think that we have these conditioning this undercurrent of conditioning of what it looks like to be a good teacher and to have good students in a classroom. When we speak to those differences in processing, differences in behavior that are not manipulative or aggressive at the root, there's another reason going on underneath it. But we're scared to speak to those things and ask for help because that is a reflection on our ability.
No, 100%. So one of the themes, at least in every general education program I've ever been in, and I imagine this is true in special education credentialing programs as well, is like literally the top thing that is talked about is classroom management. We've got PBIS systems infiltrating basically every school system in the States, it feels like. And it's all about like your report card is based on how well you manage your class. And the definition of what a well-managed class looks like is kids are quiet, they're in their seats, they're raising their hands before speaking, they're following along with the flow of the day. And
all the while we're cutting their regulation time of being outside and running around in class, playing and PE. I can't tell you how many schools have even PE.
And of course, things are going totally sideways and everybody's, oh gosh, what do we do? They have 150 kids in PE at the same time. I don't even know if it's a designated PE teacher. It's, hey, Mr. Jones is willing to take on PE. So Mr. Jones is teaching 150 kids at the same time. And shockingly, the young person with motor planning differences is having a difficult time following along. They are accidentally bumping into folks or not keeping pace, and folks are getting frustrated. Lo and behold, this young person is embarrassed and feels like garbage in PE. And
so let's just keep setting our kids up to and our teachers.
Could we press pause, go into reverse a few steps and wonder a little bit about maybe why Lisa's having a hard time during PE class with the 150 other young people of multiple ages? It's not really a head scratcher.
Right. If you have a good public school, great. If you choose private school or charter, great. If you choose to unschool your kids, great. I'm going to support you because you know what? There's not any one answer right now. You have to figure out what works for your family. Sadly, there's a lot of gaps in every system. So if you feel confident to do unschooling or homeschool your kids and figure it out and you're asking the question, do it.
And the other thing is just, I think, true of the human experience. We need different things at different seasons of our life.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. My daughter was in 11 different placements. At each turn, we thought, okay, this is given the information we have at the time, both about where she's at, both about this program or this learning opportunity or whatever, this feels like the best fit. Some of those placements were in alignment with what she needed in that moment. And some of them within seconds, it was like, oh, that was a swing and a miss. And where's the eject button? And how do we get out of here? How do we backtrack with as minimal harm as humanly possible?
I think something else you mentioned was huge. We don't use this language as parents, as teachers, even OTs. I have read some IEPs and OT evaluation reports, and I'm like, what are you talking about? I've spent 5 minutes with this kid and I already know more than your evaluation report puts out. Like, we are not doing great work a lot of times. And
we don't have great language. We don't have great communication about these things. And it's most evident to me when we have a kid in a classroom with a teacher who intuitively gets it and is already being such a buffer and so good at creating an environment where this child can thrive. And then they change grades and they go to a new classroom and this kid is spinning out in 5 minutes, right? And we're like, but it's the same IEP, but the environment is so incredibly different. And we don't have the language or the skill to look at one versus the other and to say, this is what this means. Like, for example, I'll pick on preferred seating because this is a lovely one on us.
Go for it.
Oh, we give them preferred seating. So they're going to be fine. I'm sorry, but what does that mean? What does that mean? Tell me right here in this meeting, what does preferred seating mean? What are you going to give them? Are you going to sit them next to the teacher? You're going to sit them at the front of the class? You can put them at the back of the class. What is that going to mean? How does that line up with their sensory system? We have a child who has hypersensitivity, auditorily speaking. They're picking up on everything. The overhead fluorescent light, the bird chirping outside the window, kids walking down the hallway. Where are we going to put this child to support their sensory needs? We're going to stick them right in the middle of the classroom because that will be the best spot for them, where they're right in front of the teacher. They're not going to get distracted. Or the kid who's so visually distracted and can't track. We're going to set them right in front of the board that has the calendar and the homework for the day and the ABCs all in front of them in 20 different colors. Like, your classroom is Etsy beautiful. I love it. It was worthy of the whole Pinterest page. This child they're flooded the minute they walk in your classroom, unfortunately. I'm really worried. We are setting kids up to fail before they even start.
And the other piece too, and I really did learn this from my kid, is what kind of traumatic experiences have they had in a classroom that inform where they feel safe sitting. So if we're thinking about preferential seating, like for my kid, having anyone behind her was a no. The only thing she could think about was what they were doing behind her. If they were looking at her, were they plotting something that was unsafe behind her, right? She had to be in the back of the room, which was a rarity. Our last name probably got her back there a couple of times. We don't think about all these different things. And I try to be really careful about protecting her privacy, but I have shared this one story because I think it's an interesting one about the assumptions that we as the adults make. This was something she shared, an experience she had in high school where she had come in the classroom, sat down and was trying to get herself oriented to get ready for the lesson. There was somebody behind her crinkling a water bottle. And she went into fight play. She totally dissociated. She missed basically the entirety of the period. The next thing she knew was ringing. And it took her days to tell me about this experience. I talk about this in my course, if I remember correctly. But to me, if somebody was observing this, there would have been a handful of things that potentially could have happened. One, they would have totally missed it, which is the highest likelihood because it was super quiet. Her body was probably going through the motions of looking like she was attentive. If nothing else, she certainly wasn't disruptive. That was scenario number one. Scenario number two is if somebody happened to have noticed that she seemed a little off, they might have tied it to the water bottle crinkling, but they probably would have thought that it was a sensory aversion, that the sound of the crinkle was like, oh God, that's like nails on a chalkboard and I can't cope. And so the intervention might have been like, do you need something to cancel out the sound or to move somewhere where you can't hear it? Or do you need me to go to that person and say, hey, that noise is noxious, can we not? And say we did.
Yeah.
What they would never know is that the person who tormented her for years used to sit behind her and crinkle the water bottle as a warning sign of, I'm coming to get you. And so it was a trauma response. Now, is it really anybody's business? That was what was happening for her in that moment. That's hers to say, not mine. But to me, it's an example that highlights the absolute audacity that the adults have way too often, where we think we know because we're predicating that assumption on what we can see, what we can observe, and we're making an assumption about the internal lived experience of another human, and we can never know. And they have the ability and the will and the safety to be able to communicate with us.
And that's a big ask, like to even be able to articulate that. Like not that exact experience, but I have one pretty stinking similar to that. And it took me years. I was in college before I could articulate that experience and what that meant.
Right. Yeah.
This bypass of, they didn't tell me.
Can we unpack all the layers that go into me telling you something, right? Oh, they're a great little self-advocate, except they didn't tell, right? So that assumption of they didn't tell me so everything's fine. Not such a safe assumption.
No.
Not so safe.
Okay. We could just go on and on, but we will not. Sake of this podcast and people listening. So Lisa, tell me, you have one lived experience and now you've been helping families. So tell me how people can get in touch with you. And then one of the other things is I love to share with moms who are listening, like one micro shift. What's something that you can do if this is resonating or you're feeling like, oh my gosh, this is my life happening right now. Like you're describing us trying to go through this IEP process. What is one micro shift or one small thing that this mom can do to start changing the direction of things?
God, that's a good question. I'm like, do I have a good answer?
Yes, you do. You do.
I feel like the micro shift, and it's maybe not micro, maybe it's macro, because it's going to feel really big, is it's so hard not to personalize when somebody is not seeing your child as a complete being. Like that's painful as a parent. It is so painful to feel like you have to show up and defend the humanity of your kid to somebody who it feels like is actively refusing to see it. So the shift I would encourage is to try to see that teacher as somebody who's still learning and they're behind you in their learning curve. If we can help them feel safe, going back to your question around teachers judging themselves or seeing themselves as failing in some way because a learner is having a difficult time, naming that and saying, I don't see this as a reflection of you or a judgment of you. I'm really centering my child in this conversation, and I'm desperate to partner with you so that we can be curious together. The choices being made to not see my child fully are actually interfering with you being able to have an authentic relationship with my child, because if I'm sensing it, they are. And in order for them to meaningfully access their education, they have to have a safe relationship with you. Not micro necessarily, but like that shift of trying to be able to move, I don't want to say totally away from anger because you have the right. And it's hard.
I think some parents need to express anger.
Well,
sometimes totally just go numb and we sit in our silence. And I have jumped to a IEP table, not literally, but figuratively. Or we're not doing this. I'm sorry. This is not in the best interest of the child. And mom and dad, I know you don't want to rock the boat here, but this is not okay. Can't sit by and sign off on this.
I've had providers I've had to step into and say something similar. One of the things I've recommended a number of times is if you're really in that pain, email it ahead of time. Let the team know in full transparency. I'm really not feeling heard, and this is a pain point for me, and I need there to be a shift so that we can move towards collaboration. If I don't name this, then I'm not being truthful with this team, and it's inhibiting us from being able to move forward.
I think something that parents forget about the IEP process that I just want to put out here, because it's hard. It's such a learning curve, right? I feel like they should get a badge for the first time they make it through an IEP, because by the time you get through the evaluation process and sit through your first IEP, you have been hosed down by a fire hydrant hose, especially if you're dealing with outpatient evaluations and stuff simultaneously. Like, they're just not words to describe all that is happening at once. But an IEP is not in concrete. It can always be changed. If a meeting is going off the rails, you can stop it and say, this is not the energy I want to create this document around. Can we reschedule? You can do that, and you have the power to do that. And I just want to encourage parents, you can set some boundaries too.
Oh, absolutely.
You have more power in this sometimes than you think. Now, of course, there are always that disclaimer of there are parents I've worked with that come to the table with huge asks that are not feasible at all within the school system. Knowing what your school provides and what the programs are. But as far as a person and getting sensory supports or different things in place, you can definitely ask for those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sometimes it feels like teams choose the hard by saying, no, we don't do that here. And they think they're choosing the easy. They're actually making it harder. If we did get curious and did allow for this movement, or we did loosen the grip and allowed some flexibility for how a learner engages, or didn't die on every hill or pick every battle with this young person, we would actually see more buy-in and engagement. I'm almost giving you permission to let go of whatever that schema is you're holding for yourself around being the quote unquote good teacher. You get to be human too.
And teachers coming to the table and saying, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what that looks like.
I love and welcome. Thank you for that vulnerability. I had a parent name this for me the other day. They came in with some pretty ableist, the kid is naughty, bad type language. And I found my moment and said my piece in a, here's what I think I'm hearing, and here's how I'm understanding this young person. And the principal looked at me and she was like, that is the best reframe and capture of a learner I've ever heard. I was like, not here for a trophy, here to center this young person. But what was so interesting was from that point on in the meeting, every person that spoke mirrored my language very differently than they had before. It's contagious.
Yeah, the reframe needs to be standard because we've just accepted things. Previous generation, this is what we offer, take it or leave it. It's an individualized education plan. We can be curious, we can be creative without creating more work for teachers who already have a lot on their plate. Sometimes we can create a lot less work for them by just making some small adjustments. It just takes that curiosity and creativity. Yeah. So how can people work with you, Lisa?
Oh, how can people work with me? I have a couple of different avenues that folks can work with me. I run a group coaching community, which I just love with my whole heart. We meet once a week on Fridays at 9:00 Pacific time, so noon Eastern time. It's just the most lovely, supportive group of parents and caregivers. We bring in guest speakers once a month. There's some resources available within that community that aren't available outside of it. There's a portal so folks can ask their questions and access me throughout the week. Everything is recorded and placed in the portal. So if you happen to miss or whatever, you can still catch the recording. And so that's a way for folks to work with me and have a relatively high touch at a lower price point, which is lovely and more accessible. And really, like, you're walking into a space with folks who really do know how to show up and care, and they're ready to listen and support and problem solve and think with you. I do support families individually as well. I always start that process with an Ask Me Anything consultation. This came up in the conversation with the mom last night. It is so important to me that if somebody wants to work with me, they have a sense of me. We have a sense of one another ahead of time, because you already have enough on your plate. Yeah. And you might think from Instagram or maybe this conversation, oh, she seems like we'd be a good fit. And then we get in conversation and it's okay, but maybe not. Yeah. You don't need to feel like you're working with somebody that you're trying to make it fit and it doesn't. Yeah. And I need to feel that way too, because I'm not the best fit for everyone. So I always start with that. And then if we mutually decide, yeah, this would be great, and I think I have a skill set that can support you and you feel comfortable with me, we can move forward. Folks then drive what that looks like. So I have a contract, they sign this and that, but some folks keep me hidden and the teams don't necessarily know that they've got this thought partner and coach in the background, and others are like, hi, you're coming with me everywhere short of the grocery store. Let's do it. Then we join in meetings virtually. I support families all over the country. And so that's another way.
That's so cool. Oh, it's such a nice thing. And it's always so cool. I had 2 IEP meetings in my entire career as an OT where people brought in advocates. And it was really cool when that happened, because I felt like the parent, they feel safer, right? And so it changes the dynamics, but it's not very commonplace. So I'm glad that you have that support.
I really enjoy it. I think some folks, traditional advocacy can look a little more like litigious or procedural gotcha. And that's so not mine. That it's fun to be part of a conversation where maybe folks are coming in like, what's going on here? Oh, we're here to just dive so deep about this learner, and it's going to be so good. Obviously, I can't promise that happens every time, but oh gosh, it happens so much more than for me. It's been so cathartic because I didn't do this work and I wasn't having these experiences. My conceptualization of the IEP process would be the ick that I experienced for too many years. And now it's no, this can be a good space.
Yeah, that's so cool. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm sure you will be back on here because this was lovely.
Oh my gosh, totally. That was so good. I loved talking with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
That's it for this week's episode of the Sensory Savvy Mama. I hope you're walking away with some actionable tips and a renewed sense of hope for your journey. Remember, you are not alone in this journey. Your child is amazing, and you are the perfect mom for them. If you loved this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other moms like you find our community and lets us know what you want to hear. If you want to connect further, you can find us on Instagram or subscribe to our newsletter for inspiration, exclusive sensory tips, behind-the-scenes glimpses, and so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We are all in this together, Mama. I love you, and I'm so proud of you. One last thing before we go. While I am an occupational therapist, I am not your child's occupational therapist. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. As the parent, you know your child best. So please use your best judgment and consult with your child's healthcare providers before exploring any of the strategies or ideas shared here. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out.